So Jake, how are you enjoying the show so far, the Blockchain Expo?
Quite enjoying it. It's been quite busy. It's been pretty exciting so far, and we met a lot of interesting people here.
What sort of conversations have you been having?
We've met a lot of people who, have a nominal understanding of blockchains and how cryptocurrencies work, but they just hadn't been exposed to our project yet, which is Decred.
What kind of conversations that you've been having? Are people sort of more ahead in their journey than you'd expect, or a bit behind, or where you'd expect them to be?
They're somewhere in the middle. I've been to other events, and sometimes people are entirely disconnected. They're like, what's a blockchain? I have no idea what Bitcoin is. And we don't really encounter many of those people here. Most of the people here seem pretty switched on. So if they're not here for blockchains explicitly, they're here for AI or IoT, and they already understand some of the subject matter.
For those of our readers who don't know, just give me a quick rundown of Decred and what they do.
For sure. Decred is effectively Bitcoin with a proof-of-stake governance layer added. We had to change a number of the incentive structures in Bitcoin in order to make it work. And what it does is, instead of having the experts, which are developers, or the proof-of-work miners, who are the people who operate computer hardware to make the proof-of-work go, we have our coin holders, who are the proof-of-stake holders, making all the major decisions in the currency.
So it's essentially it's a community thing rather than anything else.
Exactly. I mean, so what Bitcoin did is Bitcoin gamified timestamping. It turned timestamping into a game. And so what we've done is we've turned governance into a game. And we did it via a similar mechanism. Proof of work works through a lottery on hash power, and this is actually a lottery on tickets that our stakeholders own.
I mean, you said that when we were writing a profile of Decred in January for the blog, I think the quote was Bitcoin but without the drama. Do you still kind of believe that? Is the volatility still there?
I would say the disagreements, people are always going to disagree. But what it really comes down to is, how do you resolve these disagreements? Bitcoin lacks the infrastructure for the people who hold the coin, that is, roughly the equivalent of the shareholders and stakeholders, to make decisions and to resolve disputes. So what we've done is we've tried to remove the drama by making an explicit dispute resolution mechanism, which also rewards people for participating.
Is this a wider thing in the cryptocurrency space, not just Bitcoin as well? Because Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, threatened to quit, didn't he, in December? Was it at the start of this year, over fears of the community being too immature? Is this, what did you make of that at the time? Is this something that you're seeing?
In terms of people stepping out, and I mean, to some extent, what I'm trying to do, and what we're trying to do as a project with Decred, is actually remove me as the project lead. So I'm the project lead, and I have a lot of responsibility, and I make a lot of decisions in the same way that, say, Vitalik does. But when it comes to consensus changes, which are typically the most contentious changes within a cryptocurrency, I've made a point to distance myself from being the person calling all the shots and flipping all the switches. And my hope is that by building up the infrastructure that we've already built out to date and continuing that process, I can actually remove myself from the major decision-making process. I'll still participate, but as a stakeholder on a level playing field with all the other stakeholders, instead of as a sort of autocrat.
And there are lots of other ways in which you're different from the rest of the pack as well, I feel. So you didn't do an ICO, and you thought it was, I think you said it was unethical or something along those lines. I mean, explain that to me.
Well, so the way I see it is that when you start selling promises in exchange for tokens or shares, that is almost explicitly what is called out, at least in the United States. I can't speak to the regulations here in the UK, but in the US, that's covered by the Securities Act. And the Securities Act, in many ways, the spirit of the Securities Act is that you can't take money or established valuable items from people in exchange for promissory notes. And that is, in effect, what many ICOs are doing. Now, that does not mean that these projects are necessarily scams or, really bad actors. It means that it's a situation where it's hard to determine who's a bad actor and who isn't. And so in that context, I didn't want the regulatory ambiguity hanging over the project. I wanted to build, what we're trying to build with Decred is like a multi-decade kind of organization, not one that's like, oh, wow, the SEC doesn't like you, now you're shut down. And that was the real reason that we avoided it, is that we didn't want to put ourselves or the project in legal jeopardy. Further, I felt like it was unethical to ask people to finance something and not have necessarily the same sort of risks as I do. I took all the risk on myself because I had engineers who knew how to do blockchain engineering. They had done Bitcoin engineering before with BTC Suite. And I was in a position where, for a relatively small amount of money, roughly $300,000, I was able to bring up Decred, which made it very different from many of the ICOs we see, which want to raise tens or hundreds of millions of dollars.
And the only other thing I wanted to ask was, you mentioned the sort of long-term goals for Decred. What does the rest of 2018 have in store for you?
So 2018's got a lot of action. I'll try to keep it brief because there's so many points. So one of them is SPV wallets, that simple payment verification method. What that does is it allows you to have a light wallet on a phone or on a computer where you don't have to download the whole blockchain, and you also don't have to give up all of your privacy. If you're using most light wallets, you have to give them a list of all the public addresses you're going to use, so the wallet provider or the wallet service can track everything you're doing. That's actually being deployed right now, and then there's going to be 2 or 3 more phases of that deployment. We're also working on the Lightning Network, which is ported from Bitcoin. Bitcoin's Lightning Network is an off-chain method for making near-instant payments, and that ultimately settles on-chain. We have that infrastructure 90 to 95% done. It's just a question of getting that nasty last 5 or 10%. So as anybody in the tech world will tell you, that's always the worst part, the last 5 or 10%. And then the next thing that we have, and these 3 things that I'm mentioning are sort of the near-term items. The other near-term item is that we will soon be opening up voting on all of our allocations of developer funds. There's roughly 500,000 coins in this developer fund, and it's worth roughly USD 30 million. And it's a lot of money. I make some of the decisions in the meantime as a manager of those funds, and it's an incredible amount of responsibility. I don't necessarily, in the same vein as you mentioned Vitalik, I don't necessarily want to be calling all the shots for this, because if I make a bad decision, everybody's going to, be down my throat about it, and I don't want to be in that situation. So the voting on all of these decisions is going to be opening up sometime in the next 4 to 8 weeks, and throughout the rest of 2018, we hope to fully decentralize that process. That is, decentralize the control of funds so that none of it is actually held by a centralized corporate entity.
That's all.